Hello there folks, and welcome back to the Chap's Guide. My name is Ash. I'm your curator at this channel, where we talk about men's style and self-improvement tips, which will help us be better chaps in our journey through life. Now today is a video that I wrangled with making for quite some time. Because even though I love wristwatches, I know that there is a proliferation of videos, review videos, already in existence on YouTube in relation to this watch, the Rolex Submariner. It is probably the most common luxury wristwatch which you'll see on somebody's wrist, and it's been around a long time. So there are many reviews already in existence. But my thoughts are that a watch means different things to different people. And this watch means something different to me than perhaps any other reviewer who's been here before in this situation with the Rolex Submariner and wants to talk about it. So I've done watch reviews in the past and I intend to make more in the future. So on that journey, I think it's important to stop off at the Rolex Submariner so that you all understand my relationship with the watch, and I'll share with you some of its history and some of my thoughts on its history as well, and possibly its future direction. So let's get to it. We'll turn the camera around and we'll have a look at that watch. So here we are folks, here is the box which tells us that we've been joined by one of our friends from the Rolex family. And as I've said before, I think the box itself, very plain, very sort of vinyl covered wooden box, nothing to say that it's an expensive luxury watch. The only thing which gives us a little indication is the little gold coronet on the edge there, which tells us that it's a member of the Rolex family. So let's open that one up, and here we are. Here's today's little star, and that's the Rolex Submariner. So it's the pure Submariner, or as they refer to it in some places, the Rolex Submariner no date, because it doesn't have a date complication. So I'll just take it out of the box. Just incidentally, while we're here looking at the box, if you open up the back of the box, you'll find the in this case the receipt, the little container where you'll find the registration details and the little instruction book hidden at the back there. So useful, not really, but there it is. Right, so our friend the Submariner is here. So this is the Rolex Submariner, as I say, and this is the reference number 114060 for those of you who are reference number spotters with these watches. I know a lot of people are. And this watch has been around since 2012. Now the actual Submariner range that we're looking at here in this model have been around since about 2008, but this Submariner no date version has been around since I believe 2012 in this style. In fact, a lot of people hypothesize that it will be changed this year in 2020 because this model is due for a facelift, and no doubt if they do change it, it will be only minor cosmetic changes, but most likely changes to the movement, the caliber inside. So the Rolex Submariner is a very synonymous watch when it comes to Rolex. It's probably one of their most famous, if not their most famous watches, and it was a big watch for the watch world really. It came out in 1953, was generally available to the public in 1954. And of course originally it was designed as a tool watch, a practical watch for people who dive, and certainly originally it was intended for underwater diving and exploration in the seas, but in this day and age it's very much more commonly seen in the office or in the wine bars, or most certainly on the wrists of the elegant and stylish, I would say, as I own one. But yeah, it's not really used in the water very much anymore. It's been superseded really by much more complex and useful dive computers, which people now strap to their wrists and use for diving. But in this original format, that is the element for which this watch was created, and it still is an excellent piece when it comes to wearing in the water. It has a water resistance of 300 meters or 1,000 feet, which is probably nearly 1,000 feet more than I'll ever take it into the water. If anything, it'll probably go in the pool for a bit of a swim on holiday, and I would imagine that's the biggest stress that most Rolex Submariners ever encounter in their lives in this world that we live in today. So what else can I tell you about this piece? it has been, as I say, one of the best sellers for Rolex, and it still remains in that category. They're very hard to come by. They're a wait-listed watch, so if you wanted to buy this one today, you'd be very, very unlikely to find one in a shop. Ordinarily, the procedure is you'd put your name down with the jewelers, and you know, sometime later you get called forward, and you'd be, you know, you feel as if you're lucky to spend a lot of money on a watch in the way that they market it these days. A bit of a marketing masterclass by the Rolex company, without a shadow of a doubt. So let's talk about some of the specifics, and then I'll talk about my relationship with this watch. So what you can see here is stainless steel. This particular model, and I'll just pop it off the little cushion there. This particular model is fully stainless steel, and it's probably the most common, and it is the cheapest of the Rolex Submariner range. It's 904L stainless steel, which Rolex say is their proprietary model. It's steel rather. It's a steel which they make in their own foundry, and it is specific to their timepieces. Some say it has a bit more of a luster, but it's a little softer. It's easy to mark and scratch, but the reality is it's stainless steel. One of the beauties of stainless steel is its robustness when it comes to, you know, tarnishing or, you know, being damaged in any way. It's a very solid, tough material, and that's why they make watches out of it. Now, the piece you can see here is 40 millimeters in diameter. So as we look at it, it's measured from, you know, where my finger and thumb are there. So that would be 40 millimeters, which in the modern era is not huge. A lot of these, you know, most recent gentlemen's timepieces are certainly climbing up into the 40s. Originally it came out in a 38 millimeter size, and over the years it's climbed up to 40. I don't believe it'll ever go any larger than that. It's actually quite a large case. It doesn't perhaps look it so much. I'll put it on my wrist at the end, but it is what they call a super case, and it is quite chunky. If you look at the lugs here, you know, between my fingers here, you'll see it's quite a boxy appearance, and it wears quite large for a 40 millimeter watch. I think when it's on the wrist, it's certainly got a bit of heft, a bit of size to it, and sized for my 6.5 inch wrist. This Submariner, it weighs in at 150 grams, so not huge, but certainly you know you've got something on your wrist when you're wearing this, and you know, it feels like a bit of quality really with the stainless steel. Now, they make it in a number of different materials. It's also available in gold, in yellow gold. It's available in white gold, and it is available in two-tone, which would be stainless steel with gold running down the center of the bracelet, and also around the bezel. So you know, you can customize them to what you like. They come in different colored faces as well, or dials. This being the black, the most common, the ordinary one. You can get a green one on stainless steel, which is referred to as the Hulk. You can also get on the two-tone, when you've got gold and stainless steel, you can have a blue-faced one, which people generally refer to as the Bluesy. And then you can have an all blue face and bezel, which is only available on the white gold at the moment, and they refer to that as the Smurf, obviously, as it's all blue. Very attractive piece. So if you see anybody with an all blue stainless steel, an all blue Rolex Submariner, you know they're wearing a Smurf. It's made of white gold, and I believe at the moment they retail for something just over £30,000. So a very expensive piece indeed. This is the very simple model. It doesn't have a date complication. You see perhaps far less of these now than you see the Submariners which have a date. The date complication would be roughly where the 3 o'clock indices would be. So there would be a little Rolex Cyclops magnified window there so that you could see the date. And that's probably more common than this one. I went for the Submariner because I like the simplicity and the symmetry which comes with the basic Submariner. And to be honest, I'm not that big a fan of the Cyclops, as it's called, the date magnifier. It's a bit of a bubble which, you know, allows it to magnify the date number. I have one on a Datejust, a Rolex Datejust I own, and I don't think it's that attractive. Works on a Datejust to a degree, but on the Submariner, it's unnecessary. You know, let's be honest. You're not going to be measuring your diving time by date, so not really, you know, that needed. Very simple watch, this one. So it only tells the time, doesn't do anything else for us, and it's got hour, minute, and second hands. That's only, and it works in the diving world by allowing us to set the bezel so that you can measure the amount of time you've got left on your sort of air when you're underwater. How does that work? Well, the bezel actually only turns in one direction, what they call unidirectional, so you can't knock it and you can't add extra time to your dive, hence running out of air while you're underwater. That would be a bit of a no-no. So it's got a one-directional bezel. I think it's got something like 120 clicks, and the movement of the bezel is extremely buttery, and I actually find it quite calming to turn that bezel. You can hear the clicks. It's very sort of, very, very enjoyable to turn that. You get a sense of the quality and the precision of the engineering required to make something which just makes that lovely snicking sound as it does it. So very wonderful. You'll see the bezel, it's black on this one, and that material is called Cerachrome, which is in that bezel, which makes that black colour. Cerachrome is, again, a Rolex proprietary material. Effectively, it's a ceramic material which replaced the previous bezels, which used to be on older models of Submariners, which were aluminium and coloured aluminium. So it would be a black coloured aluminium. Now, the problem with that is they were quite easy to scratch. Hence, Rolex, when it brought in this model of Submariner in 2008, they created it with this as I say, Cerachrome ceramic material, which is almost impossible to scratch. It doesn't lose its colour, so when it's exposed to UV light, like the old aluminium ones did, they would leach the colour and they would get grey and lose their colour. This Cerachrome will not do that, so it will retain its inky blackness going forward in perpetuity, and of course in blue and in green on the models which have the bezel dyed or created in those colours. Now, inside the watch there is a 3130 caliber movement, which is now getting on a bit. It's quite an old movement, but it is certified as a chronometer, which means it's guaranteed not to lose more than 2 or gain more than 2 seconds per day, which is, pretty good for an automatic wristwatch. It has a power reserve of 48 hours. So that means if you've been wearing it for a while and you put it down, it won't run down for 48 hours, which is, just about works on a weekend if you don't wear your watch over the weekend. Newer models, of course, coming out now with much longer power reserves, and the suspicion is that Rolex will shortly upgrade this model with an improved movement, an improved caliber inside, which will give it, at least a 70-hour power reserve. This model you're looking at here is a 2019 model, which I bought last year because I'm filming this in March 2020. So we're just on the cusp, perhaps, of this model being superseded by something a little better. To help with looking at the dial and the time in reduced light or darkness, it's got the indices, the little hours and markers, are actually filled in with something called chromolite. This is, again, Rolex's proprietary material. It's luminescent material which glows when it's been exposed to light for some time after the light source has been removed. So if you go to the cinema, or presumably if you're diving in dark water, you'd be able to easily make out the time. And there's plenty of that chromolite dashed around the watch, around the indices and on the hands and on the second hand, and there's a little pip of it made here just where it would be on the bezel, so you can see where your marker would be. So very effective indeed. It's got as I say, this is a dive watch. This is all about going underwater. So it's got a what they call a trip lock crown. So when this is unscrewed, it's got 3 different layers of water proofness, if that's such a word, or water resistance will probably be more realistic, and that makes sure that the water will not seep in and cause any damage to the watch. As I say, guaranteed up to 1,000 feet or 300 meters. Originally it was a lot less than that. It was, I believe, 100 meters, but as time has gone on, the piece has evolved, and now we're up to 300 meters, which I would imagine is more than enough for anybody. So quite a lot going on with this watch. And why is it, so popular? Well, it is probably the industry standard when it comes to dive watches. Certainly wasn't the first of all dive watches. Quite famously, the Swiss manufacturer Blancpain brought in something called the 50 Fathoms, which was just a year or two before Rolex brought out this Submariner. But I think the Submariner has really, got its place, really, because it's been worn by many famous people. Probably one of the most famous fictionary wearers of this watch was James Bond. And Bond wore the watch in the books, in the literary books. And also that carried across to the movies, because the early movies were of course produced, or certainly assisted in the production, by Ian Fleming, the author. And I believe he was a Rolex wearer himself. And Sean Connery, the first characterization of Bond on the big screen, wore a Rolex Submariner, or the contemporary version of this watch, in the first 4 movies. Famously, he wore it on the NATO strap, which now you often see people wearing, the black and grey. It was also worn by George Lazenby in his one appearance as Bond on Her Majesty's Secret Service. And Roger Moore wore this watch on Live and Let Die and The Man with the Golden Gun, before kind of selling out a bit and going over to a number of other watch brands, Seiko and things like that. And Timothy Dalton was the last character to wear this watch, the Submariner. He wore it in License to Kill. It was seen many times, a few diving scenes in that. Since that time, of course, the producers have pretty much sold the wrist of Bond out to Omega, and Bond no longer wears the watch for which he's most synonymous in the books and on the big screen at the moment. We all hope one day that he'll come back to his original roots and get a Submariner back on that wrist of his. So we all living hope on that front. So what can I tell you about my relationship with this watch? Well, I'd never really been a big lover of this, and I owned a Rolex Datejust and kind of got quite interested in the Rolex heritage and history. The fact that it was strongly associated with Great Britain. I'm very much patriotic when it comes to many of the things, if I can. And although the founder of Rolex, Hans Wilsdorf, is very much obviously a German, and there was a British partner of his called Davis, but Wilsdorf was the man who took the brand on, but he was very much an Anglophile. Hence the coronet being the symbol of Rolex, and its sister brand Tudor having that name because of its association with monarchy and the royal family and so on. So very much attracted to that, and I looked deeper and deeper into the brand, and then I saw that the tool watch, or what Rolex these days call the professional side of their range, the Submariners, the GMT Masters and things like that, this was one which was probably within my reach. Most of these watches are now considerably waitlisted. And by waitlisted, I mean if you want to buy one, you'll have to go on a waiting list. And those waiting lists can measure in the years. Certainly if you wanted a Daytona or a GMT Master, you're talking 5 years and up. The Submariner, I was able to get hold of it after about 3 months, going on a wait list, because I'd bought a couple of Rolex watches at the jeweller previously, and that meant that I was propelled up their sort of reliability factor when it came as a customer, because they don't like selling these watches to new custom, because people often flip them. Because of that waiting list, there's a premium to buy the watch. So you can buy the watch at retail and go out into the marketplace and sell it the following day for £1,000, £2,000 more than its market price. So understandably, the authorised dealers seek to thwart this element of what they call the grey market, so they're careful who they sell the watch to. So being a trusted customer, I was able to buy this watch, and I've owned it for, getting on for a year, and it's been a very regular visitor to my wrist. I tend to wear it in the week to work, and I very much enjoy it because it's very comfortable, and in spite of its size, 40mm, I've only got a 6.5-inch wrist, which is not huge, but it's very comfortable. And much of that comfort comes because of this wonderful, and I say that advisedly, this very lovely bracelet. So the bracelet this is on is called the Oyster Bracelet, and particularly when it comes to the Submariner, it has what's called the glide lock bracelet, which makes it very comfortable to wear, because within just a click, and I think you can just see it here, if you click a little movement there, you can slide and alter the size of your wristband very, very easily. Very, very easily. And, it can go from, I think it's in 2mm increments. So, if your wrist swells up in the hot weather, in the summertime. It's very easy to make an adjustment of the bracelet to give your wrist a little bit of extra space, because certainly my wrist definitely swells up 1 or 2 sizes in the summertime when it's particularly hot. So nice, easy thing to change there, and that glide lock bracelet makes this watch very easy to wear and very comfortable. So you know, one of the things I particularly like about the watch is that. So, I was able to buy this watch. You'll be wondering how much these things cost. Well, they're not cheap, unfortunately. This watch costs today, if you were to buy it, £6,300 from a Rolex authorised dealer. That said, as I say, you could walk out and sell it the day after for £7,500, £8,000 if you were lucky. You see them trading for that on eBay and things like that. But it is discouraged by Rolex because they want people who love and enjoy the watches to buy the watches, not people who are going to, you know, trade them or flip them, as it's called, to somebody else. So I'll put the watch on my wrist just so you can see it, how it looks. Now, they always seem to photograph to me a little bit bigger than they actually are on the wrist. So there we go. I'm trying to get that there so you can see it. And yeah, it wears very nicely. That glide lock bracelet allows it to be very easily worn. It's quite squat. It's not a big fat watch, so it easily fits under the sleeve of a dress shirt, and it's not too obtrusive. You know, some of the much larger Rolex models, which are, you know, the sea dwellers and things like that, much larger cases, and they do dominate the wrist a bit. And I was a bit concerned of that, having merely a 6.5-inch wrist, which is, you know, kind of the small end of medium, I guess. I really didn't want to have a watch which was so large it would be prohibitively bulky on my wrist. So I was very pleased with the Submariner when I got it, to find that it was, you know, understated, easily worn, very practical, very robust. Now I want to talk about that price proposition, because for me, you know, this is a watch which you buy with the heart. And I just want to show you something. So whilst I put the Submariner down for a moment, let me show you this watch here. Now, it's not as attractive, given this is the Casio W800H, and this is available today on eBay for around about, sorry, not eBay, on Amazon for around about 15 quid. £15. And I just want to run through some of the things that this watch can do in comparison to what the Submariner cannot do. So this is a day date. So it tells you the day, it tells you the date. It's got an automatic calendar on it, so that when you set the calendar, it will never need to change. It knows that it's a leap year in 2020, and it'll accommodate for that going forward. It's got an LED on it, so it illuminates in the night. You push a button and it illuminates quite comfortably. You can read it in any light. It's got a stopwatch, which is very accurate, and it breaks down lap times and all sorts of different differentials. It's got an alarm, which you can set, and it gives you a little bleep to let you know it's working. It has got a 10-year battery, and it will run for 10 years, and it will be incredibly accurate every day of those 10 years. And when that runs out, you spend £1, you buy another battery, you stick it in, and it'll go on probably for another 10 years. And it's also got a dual time feature, so it tells you the time in a second time zone at the push of a button. And it is water resistant to 100 meters as well. And it sits, as you can see, on this resin strap, which is quite large. Quite a long strap, actually, this one. Easy accommodates somebody of an 8.5-inch wrist. So it is impervious to deterioration through rot or anything like that. And the reason I'm telling you about this is really to try and explain to you why I believe luxury watches are bought with the heart, not the mind. So this costs £15. This watch, as I've said, costs $6,300 today if you were to buy it. Rolex just put the prices up, in fact, just over Christmas. I didn't pay that. I paid a bit less than that. Bought it at a time before the price went up. But as it is today, this model, you could buy 394 of these Casio watches for one of these Rolex Submariners. But the Casio is far more capable, does all of those things I just listed. The only thing the Submariner does is tells you the time. One could argue it also allows you to time your dive by moving that bezel, but that's an entirely mechanical function, nothing to do with the watch. and independent to the, the caliber, the movement of the piece. But everything I've talked about on the Casio is materially contained within that little case. And that's where you have to say to yourself, what draws you to buy something like a Rolex? And it is something for me to do with the heritage. It is something to do with the history. It is something to do with the fact that I know this watch will outlive me. I will pass it on to my son. And, it gives me pleasure to think that he will wear this watch. Hopefully, when he wears it occasionally, look at it and he will remember his old dad. And, he was with me when I bought the watch. And it will pass down the family line. One might say that that would not be the case for the Casio, because, nobody wants to pass a Casio watch down the family line, I guess. But the Rolex does occupy that position, which makes you think, yes, it's something that I'm proud to own. And every time I put it on my wrist, it gives me joy, gives me pleasure. Nobody's ever noticed it. Nobody's ever said to me, is that a Rolex you're wearing? Nobody at all. But me. I'm the person who knows that I'm wearing a classically elegant, quality, luxury wristwatch, which is, like a little piece of fantastic engineering on my wrist, clicking away, keeping the time year in, year out, mechanically recording the passing of every second, every minute of my existence, which is very much, I think, why people are drawn to quality timepieces, because time is something, so imperative to us as human beings. It's all we have. When our time runs out, we have no more time. So the measurement and the accurate recording of time is something which is so very important to us as human beings. So there we go. That's my Rolex Submariner, my thoughts on it, and yeah, hope you enjoyed having a look at it. Well, there we are. That was the Rolex Submariner. A bit of a classic, certainly a favourite of mine, and a watch I wear pretty much most of the time. Even though I own a number of other luxury wristwatches, the Submariner does dominate my wrist time because of its rugged practicality, its classic style, and the fact that it's, a tough, do-or-die diving watch, which you can pretty much put through any test and it comes out smiling at the other end. So for me, that's all I could ever ask for. A quintessentially classic gentleman's watch which can stand up to the rigours of life. And if it wasn't for the vast expense of the things, I'm sure more people would wear them. But they are, unfortunately, prohibitively expensive for many people. So hence, this is why I share my experience with the watch, so that if you're thinking of making a purchase, you've been saving for a while, you've got my sort of views on it there. So there we go. Now, I hope you've enjoyed this review on the Rolex Submariner today. If you have, take a moment to click that thumbs up button to show me that you've enjoyed it, or the thumbs down if you haven't. And please do, while you're there, click that subscribe button as well, because by subscribing you're supporting the channel and you won't miss any of the future material that we put out on your behalf. And if you've got a moment or two and you have a mind to do so, drop me some comments in the comment section. I really enjoy hearing from people, particularly where you take a different view to me, or you tell me about something which I wasn't aware of about a topic that I've been speaking about, because this chap's journey through life is all about learning and getting better and improving all the time, and by sharing information, that's one way we can do that. So thanks for listening today. I look forward to speaking to you in the next Chap's Guide video. Until then, please take care.